And do you have any recommendations for others about how they might utilize it?
I do have a few. Let me just start off by saying, let me start off with just two remarks. One, I want to echo the thanks to the supporters, to Jesna, to the researchers. It's really an amazing team that worked on this, and the results show that. Secondly, I just want to say that I approach this challenge with great optimism, and the reason why, in addition to some of the findings, is I am the son of two Jewish educators, and my father, Alav Shalom, who was a BJE director, around the dinner table when I was 5, 6, 7, and 8 years old in the 1950s, he always talked about the shortage of teachers. And it wasn't new then, and it's not new now, and so we have an opportunity here that we have addressed in the past, and we will figure out the ways to be able to address it going forward. So what do I plan to do with this report? I'll go from some of the very pragmatic things as the director of Peach and the connections that we have in the day school field, and then I'll talk about some things more generally. We're going to have a link to this report from our website. We're going to talk about it in our electronic newsletter that goes out to 550 day schools, to leaders in those schools and donors. We'll hit about 5,000 people very strategically. It's going to be the topic of an assembly session at our biennial assembly that's taking place at the beginning of April in Boston. We'll disseminate it to our staff and to our coaches. We have about 20 coaches who work with multiple schools in the field, so we see ourselves as a major disseminator of this kind of wonderful research and being partners in making sure that it gets out there into the field and that people read it and it doesn't just stay on the shelf. Going further, I think that we would like to drive schools to consider it as well, and to be able to figure out how to make this available where schools can talk about it, because I think a discussion on a micro level can be very illuminating for a faculty and administrative team to talk about profile of teaching. I think we can drive groups of schools to think about this as well, and I would hope that we'd be able to use our influence to get central agencies and federations to engage in this kind of conversation. And Bob said something about a kind of stick-to-itiveness. I think it's about sustaining the discourse. I think to spend a little time on this and to have this be the flavor of the day for the next 6 months, that's not what we need. I think this has to stay squarely on the agenda, and we have to kind of draw a line in the sand and say, look, we know some of the promising things that have worked, and we simply have to stay at this for at least a couple of decades. This is not something that's going to turn around in a couple of years, and we have a lot of positive to build on. The news is by no means not all bad news, but we have to realize that the quality of the educators, as has been said by other panelists, it's just a sine qua non. We have to take it seriously. One of the things that we did earlier this year as a small step, I can't say anticipating the study, but it fits in nicely with the study, is that we added a community of practice, which is a community of educators in day schools who get together on the phone once a month and have online resources available, and created a community of practice for professional development leaders. Those people in day schools who are involved in doing professional development for teachers in schools. We got a lot of response to it. There's a real hunger out there. A lot more has to happen, because those are the people who really are able to deliver the kind of mentoring, the kind of sustained, embedded professional development that we know from this study and know from other studies is the kind that sticks and will last over the long run. We need collectively to urge others to create study groups on this report. We have to involve different stakeholders in it. Ultimately, some of these reports, some of these findings do require investments of resources, and I think we need to stimulate that. I think we need to be thinking about a project that is bigger than just something that's focused on day school or complementary school, but I think we need to be thinking about the challenges of getting professionals into Jewish communal life in general. I'd be remiss if I didn't just put in a sidebar about volunteer leaders in Jewish education. I think is also important, but that's not the focus of this study. But we shouldn't kid ourselves and think that we're going to get away with just focusing on the professional side and solve the issues that we know only too well often are at the policy and strategic level, that volunteer leadership, board leadership have to be involved. I think this report is a big challenge to all of us to work in non-silo fashion. The fact that some of the findings are so similar between the educators in the day school and the complementary school suggests the fact that we have a universe that we can work together, and not only do we need to work in non-silo fashion in terms of the settings where we're trying to recruit and retain Jewish educators. But I'd also like to say that we need to work in non-silo fashion as we look at the interventions that are already going on. And there are a considerable number of them that are going on in terms of teacher preparation and mentoring. I just mentioned a few. There's something that's not directly related to Jewish education, the PLP program, Professional Leaders Program project, which is a stellar program and has learned an awful lot of how do you recruit people into Jewish life to give of their expertise. But there's a whole list of things that are going on. The New York Teacher Fellows was mentioned. The Jewish New Teachers Project is funded by ADCA. UJ Federation of New York is starting a new program that's dealing with induction of teachers. You have the work at the Mendel Center. You have leadership programs that PEACH has recently convened a gathering about. New Leaders for New Schools. This is for administrators. New York City Leadership Academy. And of course you've got the big enchilada out there, which is Teach for America, where there's an enormous amount of stuff that if we really take off the investment in particular conclusions or premature directions that we want to set for ourselves and open ourselves up to the vast amount of learning. And some of the things that were alluded to, Bob's comments about notwithstanding the grain comment, the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of people out there who are making career changes. There are all kinds of recovering lawyers who are moving into Jewish life. You have a whole bunch of them up in Boston. It's like a collection of them that are going into Jewish life. We've got a lot of opportunity with people in their late 40s, early 50s, and even later. And many of them are doing it on a volunteer basis. Some of them could be doing it on a career basis as well. And finally, we do need to take on the research agenda that Len pointed to us. I think for me, one of the most sobering realities of the report is though there's an average, according to my calculation, of 8 teachers per day school that responded and 4 teachers per complementary school that responded, there's also a line in the study that said the vast majority of the participants were solo participants from their school. That's not enough data to be able to draw conclusions. So we need a lot more statistical data, but we also need qualitative data as well. It's not just about the quantity of Jewish educators that we're going to drive into Jewish education, but it's also their quality. And I'm a big believer that if you have quality people in Jewish education as administrators and teachers, those people will influence other people of quality to make a career decision to go into Jewish education. I think that's really important. And lastly, I'll say in terms of the research, statistical research, very, very important and very, very valuable. The other side, the more qualitative research, the more, if you will, ethnographic research, I think that we've got great opportunities there. And there's good news in that there are some research out there. Alex Thompson's book is coming out shortly, Back to School, about the influence of day schools on parents, and Carol Engel's book on teachers. We need more of that as well. And together with the more ethnographic case study kind of approach and more statistical research, we'll get the kind of guidance that foundations like Jim Joseph and federations and other policymakers and funders will get the guidance that they need to be able to move forward.